for being here.
Thank you.
I'll give a little intro, but honestly, easier if you introduce yourself.
Oh, yeah.
How do you pronounce the name? Rizkalla?
Yeah.
Great. So Mike Rizkalla, actually, so I met Mike at the toy fair last year because you had a really awesome AI toy that I was really curious and fascinated with. And you can tell us more about it today, so that should be super cool. So Mike Rizkalla is a visionary entrepreneur and creative technologist, recognized for pioneering work in embodied AI and human-centered robotics. The Johnny's not around today, right? Oh, that's true. Actually, hasn't been around for 2 classes now.
I don't think
Shame on
I will
Johnny.
be able to come back because they are as well as Kai and Alan. But
Kai too.
they
They're
are
gonna
very
get in
busy with
trouble.
their
Okay.
businesses.
Let's remind me to lower their grades. So Mike is the CEO and co-founder of Snorble, and it's a mission to democratize early childhood development through emotional intelligence technology, bridging the worlds of AI, animation, education to empower families and inspire children's growth.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for having me here today. So I'm going to just take you through a bunch of slides. I do a lot of pictures because I'm a picture guy, so bear with me. Okay. So firstly, I'm at MIT. it's like pretty great. You know, I grew up in Newfoundland, Canada. Are any of you familiar with where that is? Anybody know? Okay, good. We have two people. So even being here, if you saw how I grew up and how simple it was, this is an honor. And you know, this room is filled with some people. I'm sure you guys are going to do wonderful things and help change the world. And that's why I'm so thankful to be here. And thank you, Marcelo, for having me. Thank you. So, who am I? Well, first off, I'm a servant of God. I'm blessed. I'm very blessed. I have a wonderful family. I've been able to do some pretty incredible things. I've had a lot of great experiences in my life. I started off playing in a band, opening for Slayer and Pantera and touring the world. And actually, that's what fuels a lot of how I think about creativity, how I think about design, how I think about product. It's an art in storytelling and human connection. And that's what I strongly believe.
You had the dog up.
Oh, did I have the dog up? The dog answered. I don't know why the dog was there. Okay. So, my journey, right? I've had the good fortune of being surrounded by wonderful people that have fueled great experiences. And early on in my 20s, I was part of 2 companies that had tremendous growth. Second one's most pertinent to Snorble. I was actually employee 1 at the company that removed paper from 2D animation. So the entire digital animation process in 1998 we created. We went from 3 people to 200 people in just about 2 years, doing work with everyone all around the world. And then it became my job to create new experiences for children using digital technologies, or digital assets, I should say. Then I went off to start my own company called Brave New World, which was a product house. And that's actually where this story kind of starts to morph. Back in 2010, I started working in AI. And in 2014, we actually opened up our own AI and robotics lab in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I want to take you through a little bit of that journey. So, this is actually Snorble. So this is actually what I'm doing today. Snorble is a little companion for children, but through interaction and through creating these magical experiences, we gain trust. And then through that trust, we actually do things that are good for children. And that's the whole premise of this product and what it is. It is actually our own tech stack for any of you geeks like me, so we actually don't use generative AI. It is local. It's the only one in the world that actually works directly on device, and we've spent a lot of time kind of getting it to work in this way. So, okay. So with that, it all started from my AI and robotics lab, and back in again 2014, we opened this lab. And we have had many firsts. It was a real experience. It was my favorite, probably one of my favorite things I've ever done. And had a really interesting journey along with it, right? So first things first, like when we started, right? So we saw some writing on the wall. We saw some things happening with Google and some things happening with AI that meant, oh, this can actually commercialize in a different way, right? So I went to my team and I said, hey, we're gonna open up a robotics lab. Isn't this great? My senior team all showed up with the production team and we thought it was gonna be great. And then we had a lot of quiet right? And fear, right? And they thought I was crazy. Like literally, imagine going to my team in Halifax, Nova Scotia and saying, we are going to open up an AI and robotics lab, and they thought I was nuts. So, and the thing I realized was, and this is pretty common with any form of innovation, the first thing you have to do is you have to create an environment where people are okay to fail. Failure is a beautiful thing when you're coming towards something that's truly innovative, right? So, with that, this was our first 30-day project. So I told the team, I said, listen, in 30 days, we're gonna build something, I don't care what it is. You're gonna build something, don't tell me what it is, just bring it back in 30 days. And they made an RC basketball. And then I questioned my choices in terms of what we decided to do and where I was investing my money towards opening this robotics lab, right? So then I was like, okay, well now we need 60 days, right? And in 60 days, we actually built a self-balancing robot that was moving around the office. And then they made this. And this was when we started to have some really interesting moments, right? This little guy right here, I know it's on wood, but the 3D printer was much slower back then, I'm just saying, right? So what this robot was doing was it was recognizing his emotional context. It was actually saying, is he happy, is he sad? Who is in front of me? Creating proximity, and then also deciding on its own where it was gonna navigate in order to kind of create a persona around what he's doing. So there was a reaction to the emotional context, right? Okay. And that actually inspired us to create this little character. Is anybody here fans of Spaceballs? Does anyone even know what that is? I don't know if that, okay. So Mel Brooks made this really wacky spoof of a Star Wars movie back in the day, and this is actually my homage to Spaceballs. This character is the Chancellor of the Universe, right? And what we did was we made a tabletop game with a physical robot, and the very first ever, by the way, this is the very first ever multiplayer AR 2 years before Google and Apple, with this team, right? And we were able to create this back in 2014 to 2016 was when it happened. And then with that, we actually got featured on the Discovery Channel by accident. So the Discovery Channel came in and filmed us. That's me up in the corner on the Discovery Channel talking about our, and it was like, this was like the coolest thing for us ever. And something really, really amazing happened. People actually forgot it was a robot. They were cussing at it, they were insulting, there was laughter, there was all this really like fantastic interaction. And then it was like, wow, there's really an opportunity here to create this new kind of interface. Leveraging a digital environment, a physical environment, a game narrative, all these things together, right? And then I was like, we're gonna raise money, right? So we're gonna go out, we're gonna start doing this thing. This is not my first rodeo. We're gonna go out, because it's so great, right? And it was incredible. We had responses from the biggest investors in the world. I'm not saying all of them were on TV, but a few of them were on TV. And they actually responded, and they were like, we love this. This is so cool. This is amazing. And then I made my first mistake. I asked them for money, right? I asked the investors for money, which you figured that was a normal thing. And again, awkward pause, right? Awkward pause, no money, right? And it was like, this guy is crazy. I can't believe he asked us investors for money, right? So, I don't get it, right? Like at that time, Theranos was actually coming out as like this big hoopla. Most of the people I was talking to had invested in that. I'm like, I don't understand. I'm sitting on this incredible new experience. Why can't I raise the money for this product, right? So I reached out to my advisory and I wanted to ask some questions. I wanted to know better what was kind of happening. And one of my advisors is a legendary VC from the 90s, Yuval Almog, right? Brilliant guy. He actually is an MIT alumni, right? And he actually said to me, Michael, you're brilliant, but you're stupid, right? Basically, no one in history has invested in cross-section robotics, gaming, and consumer products. And I went, oh yeah, he's right, absolutely right. This was either a bad idea or a really, really good prototype concept, like that kind of thing. And what he said to me was, he said, listen, there's no question, if you can get this to a really, really evolved proof of concept, or at least something that has some commercial traction in some way, you will get investment and you will be able to build this company. But you'll need about $20 million, especially at that time. So, me not having $20 million, not sorry, investing in our robotics lab to the terror of my family and my wife, we're sitting right there, right? I realized that I couldn't do this. So I went around, I started puttering around the house, licking my wounds, like a lot of other entrepreneurs that realize they can't do what they really want to do, right? And then something really amazing happened, right? My family was growing. So this, again, like my son was just recently born, and we were going through the kind of the hurdles and the challenges of having a family, right? And something had happened. So Max right there, awesome kid, great kid, right? We're calling out right now. However, right, one of the things was that when I went to put him down for bed, it was literally the worst experience I have ever. Every night, I was like, I don't understand why he's like an angel, and then at bedtime, I feel like the devil has awoken in him, and I have to deal with it, right? So after chasing him back and forth to his room, 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm sitting up, and I start to search. I start to search for opportunities around helping my son just get into a regular routine. And when I search, this is actually a screenshot from back then. 198 million search results. Google doesn't even look like this anymore. See that, right? 198 million search results. You know what came up? Drugs, right? What came up was like a clock that had daytime, nighttime, right? Like that would work for any normal child, let alone my son, right? So then some of the dots started to connect, right? And here's some more data, more research, right? So we started to look at like, and some of this is new and some of this is old, but like here, childcare is more expensive than rent in all 50 states. That's an opportunity, right? Families invest in children's futures. Now, while they don't invest in toys, they do invest in anything that's related to child development. See that, right? So some data, right, connecting some dots. And this was the moment where purpose kind of meets passion. So I read this quote where essentially, not that it's entirely based on this, but they actually planned the capacity for prison based off of the developmental delays of grade 3 children, right? So that's a factor that they use in deciding how many people are going to fail. We've already written them off by the time they're in grade 3, right? You have to think about that. That's a terrible statistic. And what children actually need is they need storytelling. They need to be able to explore. They need to feel confident, right? And some basic education, like basic, right? So this was, from my point of view, an incredible opportunity to create a new experience with some of the learnings that we just had for young children. So then we had our philosophies, right? And whenever we create product, we actually come up with themed philosophies around what's important. And these are like guiding principles that we use as we go. So a couple of them here are, first off, we believed that bringing character to life was intrinsic for children to fall in love. And through children falling in love with this character, we'd be able to create new opportunities for them to thrive. So that's fundamental, right? A second one was it can't be too expensive, right? If you're making something for families, we don't want to make it so they can't afford to buy it, basically. It can't just be entertaining. We want to make sure that we add value to the family. And we want to gain trust. So these are some of the guiding principles, right? Okay. So then the question is, as an entrepreneur, and I'm sure some of you will be thinking about this as you kind of graduate and do other things, is do I want to spend the next 10 years of my life doing this, right? And the problem is, and one of the things that you should be thinking about is that it takes a lot of pain in making any form of company or even any product, bringing it out to market. You have to sacrifice. We sacrificed a lot as a family in order to kind of pursue this. So then we started digging a little further because I realized I did want to do it, right? I started to kind of lean in a little bit, and then we started gating our how much risk we were going to take. So here, for example, we started taking a look at character and story, and these were some of the original illustrations done by some brilliant character designers that we worked with back in the day, right? And then that actually led into the world of Lullaboo and the backstory. So we kind of leaned into character. So for example, Snorble's backstory is every time a child has their first dream, a Snorble is born. And a Snorble is the keeper of children's dreams that all exist in the land of Lullaboo, which is filled with hijinks, magic, and love. And we evolved that story into 30 characters, a series of backgrounds, and everything else, right? Okay. So the bigger question is, can we actually bring this character to life? That was actually the first gate from a testing perspective, right? And this was actually the moment when it loads. Yes, this was the moment, right, which actually helped me decide that we were going to pursue it. The very first thing that you'll see here is like we were testing a bunch of ideas around how to create a display, right? And we wanted to actually create a display that had a formed face and had some shape, but also had texture where it felt a little bit soft. And it was kind of like halfway between a stuffy or some kind of physical form and like what a child would actually want to cuddle with, right? And these were the first tests, right? So Siri started blinking, and as soon as I saw him blink, I was like, yep, we're in. I was like, I don't know, for whatever reason, now I'm in to the, sorry. So, then what we did is we started talking to everybody, like anyone that had failed in social robotics, which there was a lot of failure in social robotics, so I'm sure a lot of you have heard and seen. So, and some of the things that were consistent around failure were like price considerations, right? Engineering complexity was a huge one, which is something that a lot of people don't realize. So many parts, right? Limited experience was another one, right? And then also, and here's a really important one, finding the right partners. Finding people that you can trust with your mission to kind of drive forward. So we went through this exercise as well too, and we had some great conversations. In fact, some of these people have eventually ended up being either my advisory or on my board, which is really fascinating. And then we did an independent market research study where we actually tested the market with the idea to see how they respond, and we had an 81% desirability factor, which also started leading into the data of how we move forward, right? And then we raised $8 million, right, across 3 different rounds to basically fuel how we, thank you, I appreciate that. So, raise a little bit of money to kind of start the engine and start the machine, right? And here is the fundamental principle. It is about joy, laughter, and love. When you start talking about this opportunity, and this is what gets me really excited every day, it's the idea that you can create a machine that emulates empathy, can increase the connection between people. That is where I think we have lost our ways in terms of these devices, right? This is about increasing connection. And that's in part how we design everything. Our KPIs are rated with joy, laughter, and love. Those are actually fundamentals in our design process, right? So now let's talk about how we got here. So I'll go through a little bit of the approach, right? So we had some design considerations around function, build, and form, right? We went through the functional daily routine for a toddler and for a family, kind of started to look at the different ways that they would engage. We went through a different format for interaction design, where we were looking at everything from colors to motion to haptics, sensors, etc. But how are we going to use all these different things when essentially the cast member doesn't have any basis? So it's like a new way of looking at how they're going to interact, right? We went through a basic system architecture, okay? We went through the form, like, are we doing character, are we doing elements? Is it gonna, like, what is it gonna be? And we actually we leaned into character and theme around the basis. Our form factor was simple, balance between simple and organic, but also geometric. It's probably right over there, right in that dot right there over in the corner, right? And then we looked at what the real opportunity was. So here's the thing. In terms of how we designed it to be a brain that we could swap out skins. We could actually change our characters. We built an entire system to make characters fast. And the reason for that is, as much as we love Snorble's kind of like the base point of bringing many, many characters to life and kind of infusing that into our approach. And even with that same technology, that allowed us to have a base unit and then add skins, change characters based off of what they're wearing, right? Which is also part of our approach. And then the execution. So many drawings, mood boards, like the same things you would expect in any, I know you have great design processes, you're learning great stuff obviously from Marcelo. So all that through, then to some basic engineering, kind of get the first physical prototypes made. It was a huge lift, over 100 people all working in 6 different countries around the world in order to kind of, at different times, in order to kind of bring this from idea to a reality. And that led us to our very first prototype, our very first high fidelity prototype, which was very exciting. The first time that we saw this in real life was like a magic moment. And then that led us to our awesome team actually releasing it to our first families and hearing what those families said and seeing some of the videos and some of the things coming from those families was a truly inspiring moment. And that leads us to where we are today. Today, I'm actually in my commercial round. We've done our full cost down. I spent months in China kind of working and getting the manufacturing ready, getting everything ready to go. And today, what we're doing is we're actually in our next raise to actually launch the product nationally and then globally. And that's where we're at. Thank you. So, do you have any questions? Anything you want to ask? Anything? Bueller? Yes?
Can I ask your kid how they feel about your
Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
How do you feel about
Max
dog
and Emily,
famous?
how do you feel?
It's fun.
What? It's fun?
It's fun.
It's fun. It's very awkward. Very awkward. Thank you. No, thank you, sweetie. Thank you. It's really fun, is what they say. Yes. Yep.
So how are you supposed to interact with it, and then what does it do?
Okay. So the interaction's kind of interesting because we have. I'll tell you what the sensors are inside of it because it'll give you kind of an idea of what it is. So we have radar. That's our eyes without seeing. So that allows us to see without being intrusive, right? We have an accelerometer, so we know when it's moving. We have a climate sensor. We know what the temperature is inside and outside for many reasons. We have a light sensor, light or dark, right? We have a 4-mic array that does speaker recognition, so identifies who is speaking, right? We can actually assign authority based off that, mom, child, and my child, right? And that allows us to create a deeper connection. And then we have Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the sensors. How kids interact is through voice, right? But they also interact through touch, and they also interact through motion, right? They can use it as like raise it up over their head, and they can do different things and other things like that too. And those are all part of our, we have our MVP, which we got to launch with, and then some future interactions too, which is some of the things I mentioned. Yeah.
And how does the little thing responds? How that the animal thing responds?
Oh, so-
What is the answer, like when you're interacting with it?
Yeah. So the way that we've done it is we've actually created our own sort of curriculum. So what it does, I should have told you what it does, sorry about that. So the curriculum is actually around child development. So we help kids with their education, their social, emotional health, and then also healthy habits. And the way that it works is it's not passive, it is also active. So it's waiting for cues in order to engage. And then through that engagement, then it does different things.
It talks back?
It talks, oh yeah. Sorry, it's weird when you don't, that's right, I know it talks, so forgive me. It's actually a very fun character voice, kind of different that way, yeah. Yes?
What is like the one customer feedback that you feel like that really was pivotal from like development or the change from the MVP to what it is now?
Oh, that's a really good, tough question. Yeah. I'll get back to that in about 3 or 4 hours. No. So I think there was a few really interesting customer feedbacks that we had. So one that I really loved was our general counsel. So she actually bought one for her daughter. And her daughter is really sweet, but also a very challenging little girl, right? And that little girl actually learned her ABCs in 2 weeks using Snorble, whereas she'd been trying to teach her kids the ABCs for months and months and months. So that kind of, when you start to see hear some of those stories, they're really, really wonderful. But also too, kids actually really think it's their little friend. And we get videos all the time, where kids would actually thank me for making Snorble. And that was also really awesome. Actually, I have one, sorry, forgive me, I have another one that's really good. When we did the beta test, right? We sent off the Snorbles. The first units, one of them was the fan was so I had to change out the beta unit. And we did an interview with the family, and the dad and the family were basically talking back to us and told us, listen, here were some things we liked, here were some things we didn't like. I was like, okay, great. So then we were getting ready to ship back the unit, and we said, we're gonna swap out your Snorble. And the little girl went, what? You're gonna take my Snorble? And little girl. And she was like, no. She goes, you can't have my Snorble. That's my Snorble. and then I was like, oh. And that wasn't the only time we've heard that. There's a possession because they feel like this is their little buddy. And that's kind of cool. I think that's really cool. Yeah.
So, what do you think about? I just have this concern about young children using or having an AI as a friend.
Oh yeah. Very, very good. Yeah.
Because the AI is very sycophantic, and it's always saying, "Oh yes, you're right," but when you actually interact with a similar age talker, they're going to disagree with you. So there's some kind of lack of social skill development.
You are very, very smart. So here, I'll give you a basis for that. When we designed it, we actually designed it to have an SLM, not an LLM.
Yes.
So a small language model. And it's actually fully curated. So even in terms of how it responds, it's created by child development experts. It's not, there's nothing that happens in Snorble that we don't know will happen, so that's the first thing. And in terms of the connection, when you actually see someone like interact with a physical device versus a phone, like the phone experience, they're in tunnel vision. You know, it was like, tunnel vision, right? So he's like literally like he's in this mode. When they interact with a Snorble, it is a shared experience where they're looking up. And it actually acts almost like another cast member. Like, so another comment I got from a family was, this is like the new puppy, right? It feels like a pet in the home, right? Or something that they can engage with. That is a much healthier interaction than this, right? Yes?
I'm still curious on the interaction, how you use it. So I was thinking maybe could you walk us through like unboxing it? So I get it, and what do I do? Does it right from out of the box already interact with people, or do I need to set it up?
No setup.
And how does, what does it do with the child? Does
Yeah,
it
for
speak
sure.
to it, or?
So, okay, so right out of the box, no setup. We're the only ones that can do that because we don't need any Wi-Fi connection for it to actually work. So kids can take it in the car, they can take it on a plane, they can take it wherever they want, right? When it actually turns on, it introduces itself, and it basically starts in a conversation. And then it sings a song about how happy it is to actually meet you for the first time, right? And then at the point in which parents are involved, like parents are actually able to go through a companion app and then curate the experience based off of what they believe is best for their child. So at the point in which they set up, for example, they might say, okay, we're gonna create a bedtime routine, we're gonna create a wake up routine, we're gonna create like whatever, an education routine, whatever it might be. They basically curate that from a list of existing educational modules or educational assets, and then through play, the Snorble actually interacts with them, right? So for example, for the bedtime routine, it starts off with the bedtime parade. And at, like, let's say at 7 o'clock, it was an hour before you want to get them to bed, it actually says, like, hey kids, it's time for the bedroom parade. And then the children will pick up the Snorble, they'll go to each room of the house with music and everything else playing, where they say goodnight to every room. And then when they get to the bedroom, there's like a beautiful charging base, right, that it sits in. That charging base acts as its stage. It's kind of its concert hall, right? So when they get to that base, there's like a big event, where like there's lights and music and sound and all this beautiful stuff that happens. And that basically is the indication, or that's basically the reward that they get for getting to the bedroom, which is a huge challenge when you're dealing with a toddler. So we kind of create this reward system, this gamification around it, but we leverage music and story and gaming to basically kind of guide them through the process of getting ready for bed, brushing their teeth, and doing all kinds of things like that.
What do you feel like was the moment that investors started feeling like it resonated?
Oh yeah, there's so many funny moments I had. So can I tell you about a moment when they didn't resonate first?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is really funny. So I went to do the presentation for the first time, right? And this is like my first, okay, now I'm starting to present to people I don't know, right? And I remember showing the deck, and I remember someone saying to me, how do you know that parents are gonna wanna have an easier bedtime, like an easier bedroom? And I was like, well, because I'm a human being, I know that in my head I was like, this is so obvious that they care about this. And then the other thing was like, how do you know that they're willing to pay for this price point? I was like, well, because the other options are crazy expensive, so we know. So there's some things that you would take as almost a given, right? But in reality, my perspective and their perspective were different. The gentleman I was talking to, he had 2 nannies for 1 child, right? So so he didn't have the same, he's not feeling the same pain that I'm feeling, right? So that's when we actually did our independent market research study. That's when we started doing all those things, right? Because then when anyone asked me about price point, I was like, well, 81% said at this price point they'd buy. And they're like, oh, okay, check, right? So that's kind of how we dealt with it. Every time I got a no, I'd be like, all right, here's the no's. Let's figure out how to eliminate those so we can start moving forward to the next thing.
You also had proof from the Kickstarter.
Sorry?
From the Kickstarter that you had
Oh,
proof.
yeah, sorry, yes, it was different phases, thank you.
Okay.
So when we started, right, it was an idea on paper. A lot of the people that invested were people that I knew from Brave New World, customers, like that type of thing. As we started proceeding forward, the very next thing was we created a prototype. So we took the first $1 million that we got in, we created a prototype, and then we did an Indiegogo, right? And our Indiegogo, we sold $200,000 worth of product in 20 days on our first test. So I was able to say, oh, you're wondering if people will buy? Well, they did, right? And then we were able to use that as leverage. Okay. Any other questions? So, yes. Oh,
Yeah. So you started with this as a motivation of kind of bringing your kid to speak.
Mm.
Now that you have this thing, what is like your motivation that keeps you kind of doing this product?
Yeah. So for me, it's actually about, okay, so when you think about like child education, right? And when you look at it, like what for me was a big passion point was that we're able to take this technology and make a brilliant education available to everyone, even if they don't have the money to actually to pay for it. Like if you send your kid to Montessori in New York, for example, you're spending anywhere between $2,500 to $3,500 per child per month. That's an incredible expense, right? So imagine taking that same level of education, or even greater in some ways, and then bringing that into the home, where all of a sudden the child is just experiencing that through play. That to me is a major driver, because now we can democratize that ability and hopefully increase that child's likelihood of success. Another factor that kind of falls into play with that is that 80% of your brain is actually developed by the time you're 5. So by using this technology, we're actually able to help lots of kids become healthier and smarter and establish healthy habits that they take with them.
I was curious, the journey of creating products is a long one.
Yeah.
And it's one that at many points in time, you get this like path sort of target, right? So I'm curious now, then all of this, looking back, are there specific things that you change about the design or the process
Oh,
that
yeah,
you
yeah.
made that, I'm sure you've learned, like what's the V2 version in your mind? Like what are some of the things that you change or tweak?
So one of the things that we did, which I'm really proud of, is we actually developed it as a kind of an IoT hub. So it's not just a character, it actually connects to other things. It acts as an edge processor, it commands other things. It does, like from a compute standpoint, we're able to do lots of weird things with it, right? Which I'm really happy about. When we started, we had this idea. I wanted to make the entire back of that dome, right, that it existed, I wanted to make that the Northern Lights. I thought, what a beautiful experience to have the Northern Lights like kind of going off in a child's bedroom. And we never quite got there. And that was always something that I wanted to do, because our idea is that we want to bring the magical experiences from concert halls, theme parks, like those types of experiences into the home using this format of technology. So if I had my time back, I would have fought harder for that. That was like a thing I really wanted that I never got to. Yeah. Anybody else?
Even down to the tacticals of like how to charge it and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, that was a bad one too. Yeah. So that's a good.
Charging.
Yeah. So okay. So here's a toughie, right? So we designed our first units. We only had 2 changes that we had to make from the first set of hardware to the second set of hardware. One of the major ones was we had these little pins that the Snorble sat on to charge, right? So it pops on, pins go up, and it charges. Those little pins, unfortunately, are fairly finicky, right? So we broke a lot of bases that we had to replace. So I spent a lot of my time taking a Snorble out, separating it from a base, putting it back in a box, and shipping it to a customer that had that issue. And the second thing that happened, which was super hard, when we were designing our circuit boards, we had a crystal that we had signed off on. Somehow a different crystal had ended up on the first set of Snorbles. Yeah, so that turned into a whole fiasco of like, I have a funny video, I'll send it to you actually, it's really funny, of my garage filled with 130 Snorbles that came back that I had to then update and figure out how to, and then ship all 130 after, yeah. So we had I had 2 interns with me, and then we had my whole garage filled with seriously 100 plus Snorbles. That was kind of an interesting moment.
Remember you talked about sacrifice?
Yeah, that's right. The car stayed out of the garage. Yeah, so that was something I wish we had paid more attention to before it actually shipped in our QA process for sure. Yeah.
And how
And the
does
form
it work?
factor.
Because I imagine that kids develop a strong emotional connection to their Snorble, but they break, right? Like you mentioned earlier that it's kind of like a pad, but it's actually not a pad. That's a living creature.
Yeah.
That that is intelligent in all this way. Very interesting, fascinating, beautiful. So how does that work? Like, do kids freak out when they break? Do they
Oh yeah. So
meltdowns?
Oh, yeah.
Is that okay? Is that not okay? What should we do about it? And I'm saying this because I have 2 little kids.
Yeah.
And I recently, a friend of ours gave them this little AI toy.
Which one? Do you remember?
I forget what it's called exactly. It was like a little furry, he has a 2 eyeball, 2
Yeah.
screens for eyeballs. And it did not last like 15 minutes in my house. One, they loved it, right? One, they played with it, et cetera. And then at one point, I was like, all right, let's see how far this goes, right? So I'm like, tell me about Taiwan. And it's like, Taiwan, Jesus shoot first. And then at one point, I think it was trying to be like, he kept talking. I was like, okay, it's time for the kids to go to bed now. Like, can you be quiet? And this thing is like, well, no, it's not time yet for the kids to go to bed. I was like, no, it's not for the kids to go to bed. They started arguing with me. And then he got angry. I had this like fire on the eyeball.
No way.
Immediately out of the house.
No way.
Yeah, it went totally off the edge.
So, So I gotta tell you, like, this is so you want to hear something crazy? I remember, because we started this back in 2019. So you gotta remember, like, 2019, first robotic project was back in 2014. So imagine, right? So at the time when we were looking at it, like, we were seeing all the stuff happening from OpenAI. We were seeing all that stuff come in, and we were seeing the generative AI movement kind of come in, and we were like, oh, okay. And then it came in, and we were like, oh crap. Every investor I spoke to was like, what are you doing? Why isn't this generative AI? It should be generative AI, right? And I was like, because it's not safe. It's not safe. Like, we need a rigid structure for young kids. We have to have controls. We have to have, those types of things. And everyone argued with me. And then this last year, to your point, there's actually legislation now that's being put out around early childhood. There is, at Toy Fair this year, all chatbot related products, not allowed. Yeah, we were allowed, right? Because we're not generative. We're using AI. We have our own small language model. It is a structured model, right? So there's no way it can do any of the things that you mentioned.
But if it's a small language model, it's still generative, right? Which means it's not deterministic.
No. It's actually, everything is fundamentally logged. It cannot, it's not allowed to, it will not ever produce anything. And the other thing that we did, which is different, is we actually recorded the audio. We recorded the audio, we created the animations for each one of the responses and everything else. Yeah, and the reason why, it wasn't just because we, at the time, the tools and all that stuff. It was actually because we wanted the character to feel real. Like, the generative models, they don't even, I'm sure that when you talk to the character, it's like, nah, it feels a bit like hokey, right? This feels like a little character. And that's actually how kids really connect with it. So. Yes?
Have you observed any changes in parent-child relationships?
Yes. So there's a couple things that we do. So one, friction is reduced. Here's my favorite. Parents would tell us that we used to take them to.
I have an over.
That's okay. It's angry at me. It's like, you stop talking. You stop. So what had happened was that we ended up actually getting parents tell us that when they were putting their kids to bed, previously, before having a Snorble, it might take 2+ hours to put their child to bed. After Snorble, 37 minutes, 42 minutes, because they were able to run a routine. And what that did was that took away friction. The removal of friction gave people a little bit of time back, but also made it much better experience for the child. Like, half the time what people don't realize is that if a child's going to bed, if they're putting up a fight, it's not always because they're not tired. Sometimes it's because they want to talk, or they want to express themselves. That's part of it. So throughout this kind of whole plan that we have for bedtime routine, we allow them to be in control, and also for them to experience that kind of bedtime routine in a different way. So that removal of friction is a big win, right? The other thing is, and this is something that we're working towards, we don't have it in there yet, but we're working towards it. It's the act of creating new moments of love within the family structure. So imagine, for example, taking a moment where you don't talk and you just hug, right? Go find your parent and tell them it's time for this quiet hug moment, right? That's a small thing, but it's incredibly valuable, right? Because we forget, we're all running around like this, and then all of a sudden, if you just take a second to have that connection, that's a very powerful moment. So increasing those moments, I think, is very valuable.
The friction thing we had in our own house.
We had it, yeah. Actually, yeah, it's a good, so Emily, even up until like probably about a year ago, even up to about a year ago,
Yeah.
she actually was still using Snorble to go to bed. She'd grab his hand, she'd be like, "Hey, I'm going to bed." She'd go upstairs, and she'd be like, all of a sudden I'd hear the prayer routine running, and then I would hear the calm down, wind down routine out almost every night. And I was like, so her self-soothing kind of method was, take him to Snorble, it was like walk around, and then take him upstairs. Yeah. Yes.
Can I go back to what I was talking about? Like, what do you think is next for Snorbles? Because I think lots of people, when they have an AI integrated product, they want to expand its capabilities,
Yeah,
expand
for sure.
the model and like the sensors and like what it can see. But in your case, it seems like you want to limit that. So what is next for you?
Well, so we do update the small language model. We do that through Wi-Fi. But what happens is that it opens up connection for a second, downloads whatever's new, and then closes the connection, right? So we have plans for adding in language support, so teaching languages. We have plans for adding faith and spirituality in there as well too. So you'll actually be able to set up your own different prayer routines or little stories from the Bible or the Quran, or, whatever, right? So having that ability is really powerful. And then as well too, because it's an IoT hub, like it connects with, we already have that established with the base, right? But what we're also going to be able to do is insert in new products. So the idea of adding in like things like smart toothbrushes or other things that would be part of the routine, right? We can do that as part of our plan for how we get big, and grow big.
Also, leveling up the education.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry, thank you. So we're going to level up the education as well too, right? So the idea of having, for example, gaming levels. So the way that it works now is that as a child gets better at something, right, the parent gets notified and they can unlock a new level. The new level might be them going from like, let's say counting, to all of a sudden doing counting up to 100, to counting backwards, to addition, to then subtraction, and like kind of adding in little steps that they kind of unlock through play. That's it. Are we wrapping? Beer is on me. Thank you. Thank you guys. Thank you.